The moment my mom collapsed at the block party, I knew something was off. Not just maybe she got too much sun off. I mean full-blown, got punched, icy hands wrapped around your neck, kind of wrong. She'd only taken 2 sips of her wine.
2.
Then she dropped her glass, clutched her stomach, and slumped into my arms like a marionette with its strings cut. And standing right across from us, arms folded, lips pursed, and glaring like she was watching a raccoon dig through her trash was Karen. Not just any Karen. Janice Jorgensen, president of the Ridgemont Bluffs HOA. The kind of woman who could make a grown man feel like he forgot to tuck in his shirt just by looking at him. She ran our neighborhood like a mini dictatorship, complete with surprise inspections, passive-aggressive newsletters, and fines for things like inappropriate gnome placement. I'm Gabriel Jensen. I'm a mechanic. I fix busted engines, not neighborhood drama. But when someone poisons my 78-year-old mother at a community event, that changes everything. The ambulance got there in minutes. Mom's lips were pale, and she was barely responsive. The paramedics moved fast, asking questions I couldn't answer yet. I was too busy replaying the last half hour in my head. She'd been fine when we arrived. She picked out her usual Cabernet from the community table, poured herself half a glass, and chatted with the neighbors while I finished setting up our folding chairs. And then Janice walked up. I remembered her holding a bottle of wine. I remembered her fake smile. I remembered her saying, "Oh, let me top you off, sweetie," like she was doing Mom some kind of favor. The bottle was unlabeled. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I mean, who brings an unmarked wine bottle to a public event? That's when it hit me. She brought it to only top off my mom's glass. Not mine. Not anyone else's. "Gabe." My neighbor Jonah tapped my shoulder. "They're taking her to St. Mary's. You going with her?" "Yeah," I said, already climbing into the ambulance. "Can you grab our stuff?" "Of course," he said. "I'll bring it by your place later." At the hospital, they confirmed what I was afraid of: chemical contamination. It wasn't just bad wine or spoiled grapes. There was bleach in her system.
Bleach.
Who the hell puts bleach in someone's drink? I knew who. I just didn't have proof yet. 2 days later, Mom was stable but still weak. Her voice cracked when she tried to speak, so I told her not to worry. I'd take care of everything. I started with the HOA security cameras. Every event at the Ridgemont Bluffs clubhouse got recorded. Janice made sure of that when she pushed for new surveillance to ensure community safety. I called the HOA office first thing Monday morning, asked to review the footage, and was told it was unavailable due to maintenance.
Right.
I drove to the clubhouse anyway. The doors were locked. Lights off. I knew the cameras weren't down because I watched one swivel as I got out of my truck. I knocked anyway. No answer. I wasn't dumb enough to barge in. Instead, I went next door. The clubhouse shares a wall with the community gym, which had windows facing the event lawn. I asked the gym manager, a high school senior named Zeke, if he saw anything. He shrugged. "Not really. But the cameras are on. I know because the red light's still blinking." That confirmed it. Janice was lying. She was hiding something. Now, I'm not a detective. But I've got one thing going for me. I don't let things go. Not when my family's involved. And not when someone tries to kill my mom. I went home and started digging. I installed a new security camera on our porch, one with audio. Then I went around knocking on doors. Most folks said they didn't see much. Some were honest. Others, especially the HOA loyalists, suddenly forgot how to speak English. But then I hit gold. Mrs. Lively, 3 houses down, said something odd. "I saw Janice pour your mother's wine," she whispered at her door. I thought it was strange. She didn't offer to pour anyone else's. Just hers. "You sure?" She had that smug look she gets when she finds people for leaving their trash cans out 10 minutes too late. I remember thinking, what's she up to now? That was all I needed. I posted on the Ridgemont Bluffs neighborhood board privately, of course. Just a message asking if anyone had photos or videos from the party. A few people sent group shots, some selfies, and bingo, a short video clip from Jonah's wife, Kira. She was filming their toddler dancing to the music. In the background, you could clearly see Janice approach Mom, hold up a wine bottle, and pour it into her glass. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was something. Still, I needed more. I knew Janice would never admit anything outright. She was too smart for that. But if there's one thing I know about control freaks, it's that they love to gloat when they think they've won. So I set a trap. I went to the next HOA meeting. Janice didn't expect me there. Her eyes narrowed the second I walked in. She was in her usual power stance, arms crossed, lips tight, blazer, like she was running for Congress. The room was full of folding chairs and bored residents, all half listening to updates about mulch distribution and speed bump repainting. I sat in the back.
Quiet.
Waiting. When the meeting ended, I approached. "Janice," I said casually. "Got a minute?" She looked down her nose at me like I was a pile of untrimmed hedges. "I'm very busy, Gabriel. I just wanted to say thanks," I said, "for looking out for my mom at the party. I heard you offered her a special bottle." Her eyes flicked.
Oh, yes.
That was my personal blend. A little strong, maybe, but I'm sure she enjoyed it. She collapsed after 2 sips. "Well," she said, her voice syrupy now, "maybe it was just her time."
Ist sehr her.
She smiled. I clicked the pen in my hand twice. The tiny mic inside it had been recording the entire time. And the camera in my shirt pocket? Yep, clear as day. I walked out without another word. Back home, I copied the footage, backed it up to 3 drives, and sent one to a lawyer friend I knew from college. Then I called the police. They didn't take long. The next morning, 2 cruisers rolled into Ridgemont Bluffs. Janice was watering her roses illegally, I might add, since it was outside regulated hours when the officers cuffed her right there on her manicured lawn. The charge? Attempted poisoning. And I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Because once you peel back the curtain on an HOA like this, you find way more rot underneath. 2 days after Janice was hauled off her front lawn in handcuffs, the neighborhood was quieter than it had been in years. Not peaceful, just quiet. Like the air after a thunderclap, buzzing with what people weren't saying out loud. Lawns still got mowed. Sprinklers still clicked on at dawn. But nobody made eye contact. People walked their dogs with their heads down. Trash bins were wheeled in with a little more urgency. It was like the whole place was holding its breath. I spent the first morning after her arrest at my kitchen table fielding phone calls. First from the detective assigned to the case, then from the district attorney's office. The footage I'd recorded wasn't just useful, it was damning. The DA said they were considering multiple charges, including aggravated assault with a toxic substance. Apparently, bleach in wine qualifies as a chemical weapon under state penal code. That was news to me. Made my stomach churn all over again. Then came the call from city records. "Mr. Jensen? You filed a request to obtain HOA financial disclosures." I had. 2 nights earlier, while I was reviewing the footage one last time, something occurred to me. How did Janice afford all those security upgrades she bragged about last quarter? Multiple new cameras, a new irrigation system at the clubhouse, even paid for new community signage, whatever that meant. The HOA had a modest budget, and those upgrades didn't come cheap. I submitted a formal request for their expenditures under the Community Association Transparency Act. "Looks like you've uncovered some discrepancies," the clerk said. "Would you like to come down and review the files in person?" I was already putting my boots on. By the time I got back that afternoon, I had a folder full of printed spreadsheets and a legal pad full of notes. Janice had been siphoning off HOA funds for almost a year. She'd created fake maintenance orders, routed payments through a company called Golden Leaf Solutions, and signed the checks herself. Only problem? Golden Leaf didn't exist. The address listed on the invoices was an empty lot 2 counties over. She was funneling the money into an offshore account under her maiden name. It wasn't just attempted poisoning anymore. It was full-blown embezzlement. I dropped off the paperwork with the DA's office the next morning. The receptionist raised her eyebrows when she saw the volume. I didn't wait around to explain. I had another stop to make. The Ridgemont Bluffs HOA board. With Janice gone, the rest of the board was scrambling. They'd called an emergency meeting for that night in the clubhouse conference room. When I arrived, the place looked like a funeral parlor minus the flowers. The board members, all 5 of them, sat around the oval table looking like they were hoping to be anywhere else. I didn't sit. I stood at the end of the table and laid the folder down with a quiet thump. "I assume you've heard what she's been arrested for," I said, nodding toward the empty chair at the head of the table. "What you probably don't know is that she was also stealing from the HOA. I have the records." Walter, the treasurer, wiped his glasses with shaking hands.
Are
you saying this was a coordinated effort?" "No," I said. "I think you were all just asleep at the wheel." Linda, the secretary, leaned forward. "But we signed off on those budgets." "Because she doctored them before you saw them." The room fell silent. "I'm not here to gloat," I continued. "I'm here to tell you that if you don't vote to suspend operations and appoint an independent auditor, I will take this to the press. I already have a contact at Channel 5. She's very interested in public fraud tied to local leadership." Harold, the vice president, cleared his throat. "You want us to suspend the HOA temporarily until we can sort out what's real and what's forged. And until then, no fines, no citations, no enforcement. You're on ice." They voted unanimously. When I walked out of that room, I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted. But it wasn't over. Not yet. That night, someone threw a rock through my front window. I heard the crash around midnight, ran downstairs and found glass all over the carpet and a chunk of concrete lying in the middle like a calling card. No note, no spray paint, just silence. I called the cops. They filed a report, but didn't promise much. "Could be a random act," the officer said. "Could be retaliation. Either way, we'll keep a cruiser nearby for the next few nights." I didn't sleep. Instead, I reviewed the HOA's email records, which I'd subpoenaed through the DA's office. Most of it was boring complaints about yard ornaments and requests for new pool furniture. But then I found an email from Janice, sent 6 months ago, to a board member named Tucker. The subject line was, "Handle it." The body of the email read, "The Jensens have been pushing back on our enforcement. Time to make an example. You know who to call." I stared at the screen for a long time. The Jensens. That meant Mom and me. I looked up Tucker's address. He lived on East Ridge, near the entrance. I knew the house. He drove a black Escalade with custom rims and didn't wave at anyone. Always looked like he was chewing something sour. I printed the email, highlighted the damning sentence, and dropped it off at the police station first thing in the morning. By that afternoon, they had a warrant. Tucker was arrested for conspiracy to intimidate a witness. Turns out, he'd hired a local kid to send a message by vandalizing my place. The kid cracked in under 10 minutes and confessed. Named Tucker directly. Said he paid him $200 and promised no one would press charges. He was wrong. The neighborhood finally started to wake up after that. People who'd kept their heads down for years started showing up at the community forums. They talked about fines that didn't make sense. Inspections that never happened but resulted in violations anyway. One woman, Gloria, said she was told to remove her wheelchair ramp because it didn't match the aesthetic. She'd been too scared to fight it. I helped her reinstall it the next day, with 3 neighbors offering to pitch in. The new acting president of the HOA, Harold, called for a full audit. A real one this time from a third-party firm. They uncovered nearly $70,000 unaccounted for over the last 18 months. The HOA's insurance refused to cover the losses, citing internal negligence. Janice's trial was scheduled for the following month. When the day came, I sat behind the prosecutor with my arms crossed. Janice walked in wearing a gray suit and the same contempt she always carried. But this time, she didn't get to control the room. The prosecutor walked the jury through the evidence. The video, the financial records, the emails, and the audio clip from my pen recorder, which had captured her dismissive comment about my mother. Her defense attorney tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, said she meant to pour cleaning solution into a trash can, and got confused.
But the jury didn't buy it.
Neither did the judge. She was convicted of attempted poisoning, felony embezzlement, and criminal conspiracy. Sentenced to 15 years without parole. The courtroom was silent as she was led away. Outside, a reporter shoved a microphone toward me. "Mr. Jensen, how does it feel to take down the most powerful figure in Ridgemont Bluffs?" I looked past her, toward the courthouse steps where my mom stood, cane in one hand, sunglasses on, chin lifted. "It's not about power," I said. "It's about right and wrong. And no one gets to poison my family and walk away." The reporter blinked, then lowered the mic. We walked home together. The sun was setting, and for once, Ridgemont Bluffs didn't feel like a prison of manicured lawns and silent fear. It felt like a neighborhood again. A real one.
And I plan to keep it that way.
The morning after the verdict, our street breathed for the first time in years. No clipped whispers through hedges. No stiff waves from behind curtained glass. Just the sound of wind rattling the oak limbs overhead and the occasional dog barking at the mail truck. I sat on the porch steps sipping burnt coffee, watching my hands tremble like they were still bracing for a fight that hadn't come yet. Old habits. I didn't expect a knock on the door that early, let alone from someone wearing a badge. "Mr. Jensen?" The detective from the poisoning case stood on the front walk, one hand resting on his belt, the other holding a manila envelope. "You already got your conviction," I said, standing. What else could possibly be left? He didn't smile. "You got a minute?" I stepped aside and let him in. At the kitchen table, he slid the envelope across to me. "We pulled more files after your financial report. Expanded the search. Turns out Janice had more than one iron in the fire." I opened it. Inside were printed photographs, grainy, time-stamped, but clear enough. They showed Janice standing beside a man I didn't recognize. Tall, lean, dark coat. Looked like he'd been carved out of shadows. They were meeting in the clubhouse back parking lot at night, long after hours. A second photo showed an envelope changing hands. "What am I looking at?" "That guy," the detective said, tapping the photo, "is Raymond Lott. Known fixer. Had a hand in a few shady HOA dealings across the state. Mostly intimidation, property coercion, and forced evictions. Never been charged. No one ever stuck him with anything. Until now. Not quite. But your case gave us a reason to dig deeper. What we found was a pattern. Janice wasn't just stealing. She was laundering money through shell companies connected to a property acquisition ring. They'd target older homeowners, especially the ones with no heirs or those deep in debt. Then they'd find them into foreclosure and swoop in to buy the properties on the cheap. I sat back, stunned. "You're telling me this wasn't just about our HOA being petty? They were running a whole racket." "Not the whole HOA. Just Janice and a few others. Board members from other neighborhoods, too. We're coordinating with the State Fraud Division now. But we've got one problem." "What's that?" "Your HOA's bylaws gave Janice emergency powers over financial decisions in the event of community security concerns. She declared one 6 months ago. Said there were reports of vagrants near the retention pond. There weren't. We know. But it let her push the budget around without a second vote. That makes the board look complicit. Even if they weren't." I leaned forward. "So, what's the play?" "We need someone local to help us unravel it from the inside. Someone the neighbors trust. Someone who knows where the cracks are. I stared at him. You want me to join the HOA? Not just join. Run it. I let out a bitter laugh. You realize I've spent the last year trying to avoid these people? You're the only one who stood up to her. The others are too scared or too embarrassed. But if you're in charge, you can open the books, clean house, and help us finish this. I didn't say yes right away, but I didn't say no either. 3 days later, I stood in the clubhouse meeting room, officially elected interim president by a unanimous vote. Not because everyone liked me, because no one else wanted the job. The room smelled like stale carpet and defeat. The old board sat to the side, avoiding my eyes. They'd been legally cleared of criminal wrongdoing, but the guilt clung to them like mildew. My first order of business was simple: transparency. I unlocked the HOA's online portal, uploaded every financial document, and made them public to the residents. I posted the budget, the audit results, and even the minutes of the last 6 emergency board meetings. The inbox flooded within minutes. I created a neighborhood forum where people could speak without fear. We called it Clear Ridge, a not-so-subtle jab at Ridgemont Bluffs. Within a week, over 200 residents signed up. Complaints poured in. Stories of mysteriously denied permits, inexplicably delayed maintenance, and sudden code violations after people refused to sell their homes. One message hit me like a hammer. It was from a former resident named Calvin Reyes. His mother had lived on the south end of the neighborhood, in a modest ranch house. She died last year. According to Calvin, she was fined repeatedly for non-compliant landscaping, despite having a xeriscaped front yard approved by the city. Janice had pushed for foreclosure proceedings 3 separate times. After his mother passed, her home was sold to a holding company for under market value. I checked the records. The buyer? Golden Leaf Solutions. The same fake company Janice used to move funds. But the deed had been transferred again, this time to a company called Ridgehold Properties, LLC. I cross-referenced Ridgehold's address with the Secretary of State's business registry. The registered agent? Raymond Lott. I brought it to the detective. That's the link we needed, he said, eyes lighting up. Ridgehold's been active in 5 other neighborhoods. Same pattern every time. We're going after them with the RICO case.
I didn't even need to ask what that meant.
Racketeering. Organized crime. The dominoes fell fast after that. Warrants went out across the county. Law was picked up in a hotel outside Phoenix, trying to skip state lines. They found burner phones, forged deeds, and a spreadsheet listing over 30 properties marked for acquisition. Back at Ridgemont Bluffs, the fallout was nuclear. We held a community meeting in the park amphitheater, the only space big enough to hold the crowd. I stood at the mic, the evening sun painting the grass in gold. I won't pretend to have all the answers, I told them. But I promise you this: no more secrets. No more shady deals behind closed doors. This neighborhood belongs to its people, not to a handful of cowards playing real estate kingpins. The applause started hesitant, then rolled across the crowd like thunder. After the meeting, one of the newer residents, a nurse named Leah, stopped me near the gazebo. She was holding her toddler, who was gnawing on a rubber giraffe. "You think we'll ever feel safe here?" she asked. I looked around. Families laughing. Neighbors actually talking to each other. Kids playing kickball on the slope behind the tennis courts. "We're getting there," I said. We installed cameras in public areas, real ones, with clear signage and community oversight. No more hidden surveillance. We rewrote the bylaws, stripped the board of unilateral powers, and required all financial decisions to be voted on by a resident majority. And we started a community fund to help struggling homeowners avoid foreclosure, funded, ironically enough, by assets seized from Janice's offshore accounts. Mom finally came home from the rehab facility. She'd lost some weight, but not her fire. First thing she did was throw out every bottle of wine we owned. I'm switching to tea, she said. Safer. And if someone tries to spike that, I'll see it coming. I didn't argue. One afternoon, I found her sitting on the porch with Gloria, the neighbor who'd been forced to remove her wheelchair ramp. They were laughing over a photo album, trading stories about Ridgemont before the HOA turned into a tyrant's playground. That's when I knew we'd won. Not just in court, not just on paper, but for real. Because you can't fake trust. You can't buy back community with fines and newsletters. You earn it one neighbor at a time. And if anyone ever forgets that again, they'll have me to deal with. By the third week after Janice's conviction, the only thing left of her reign was a cracked nameplate still hanging crooked on the door of the old HOA office. No one had bothered removing it yet, like everyone was waiting for someone else to declare it officially over. But the truth was, her mess was still unraveling. The RICO investigation had widened. Agents from multiple departments were now involved: state real estate regulators, consumer protection attorneys, even a task force from the Attorney General's office. Turns out the financial fraud linked to Janice ran deeper than a few bad checks and a fake company. She'd been part of a larger network of HOA executives across the state, funneling seized properties into a web of shell companies. The money trail led through phony landscaping contracts, falsified security upgrades, and inflated maintenance invoices, all rubber-stamped by boards too lazy or too intimidated to question a thing. But here's what finally made my blood run cold. Detective Harlan showed up at my door again, this time with a federal agent in tow. Special Agent Reyes, badge clipped to his belt, didn't bother with pleasantries. He had a folder clutched tight in one hand and a look like he hadn't slept in days. "We need to talk somewhere private," he said, scanning the street. I led them to the garage, shut the door behind us, and waited. Reyes opened the folder and laid out a series of documents on the workbench: property transfer files, internal HOA memos, and one old, handwritten note that made my stomach lurch. It was a list of names. At the top, targeted for acquisition phase 3. 6 names were circled. Mine was one of them. So was my mother's. The others were elderly residents, most living alone, with no listed next of kin. 2 of them had recently passed away. One from what the coroner had ruled a fall. The other, a man named Ellis Grayson, had died in his sleep a few months earlier. But Reyes pointed to the toxicology report. "Trace amounts of methyl isocyanate," he said. "Not enough to trigger suspicion, but enough to raise questions when taken with a pattern." You think they were testing methods. Janice and Lot were escalating. Your mother might not have been the first. I felt my fists clench. Why wasn't this caught earlier? We didn't have a reason to look until your case broke the lid off. No one thinks of HOAs as criminal enterprises. That's changing. Reyes pulled out a final document. It was a warrant. They were expanding the investigation into wrongful deaths and negligent homicide. Janice was already facing decades in prison, but now the scope had shifted into something darker: deliberate targeting of vulnerable homeowners to force property turnover. And somehow, it still wasn't over. A week later, a man named Daryl Crenshaw showed up at the clubhouse. Tall, clean-cut, wearing a pressed charcoal suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Said he was a consultant sent by the state's HOA recovery task force.
I didn't buy it.
Not with the way he started asking questions that felt more like veiled threats. "You've done quite a bit of restructuring here, Mr. Jensen," he said, glancing around the office. "Some might say too much, too fast. That can spook investors." "We're not for sale," I said, not bothering to offer him a seat. "Oh, I'm not here to buy. I'm just making sure you're not violating any procedural norms. You've removed multiple board members without due process. They resigned. Voluntarily. Still, it's important to follow the bylaws." I grabbed a binder from the shelf behind me.
"Here."
They've been rewritten, ratified by a 71% vote from the residents. He took the binder, flipped through a few pages, and set it down with a little too much care. Well, he said, rising. Keep up the good work. Just remember power vacuums attract problems. After he left, I called Detective Harlan. He ran Crenshaw's name through a few databases. What came back wasn't a complete file, but it was enough. Crenshaw was linked to 3 other HOAs that had suffered mysterious leadership overhauls shortly before major development projects broke ground. All 3 neighborhoods had been bulldozed within 2 years. New condos went up. The original residents were gone. I called an emergency town hall. We met in the old middle school auditorium. Over 200 people showed up. I took the stage and laid it out, every dirty detail.
They're not done, I said.
They want to finish the job Janice started. If we let them, this neighborhood becomes another development site. Someone shouted from the crowd. What do? We unify. We file for municipal independence. We dissolve the HOA entirely and reclassify as a special district under city charter. It wasn't easy. The process took months. But we got the signatures. We brought in a municipal attorney. We held formal hearings with the city council. And after 6 weeks of testimony, background checks, and more paperwork than I care to remember, we did it. Ridgemont Bluffs was no longer an HOA-governed community. We were a self-administered district with elected representatives, public budget meetings, and full transparency under city oversight. The first thing we did was rename the neighborhood. No more Bluffs. No more branding. We voted. The winning name? Oak Ridge Commons.
Simple. Honest. Ours.
Crenshaw disappeared after that. No more visits. No more threats. Reyes said his name came up during the federal probe, but he fled the state before an indictment could be filed. They'd get him eventually. People like that always slipped up. As for me, I stepped down once the new council was elected. I never wanted the power. I just wanted peace. I handed the reins to a teacher named Rachel Kim Sharp, steady and unshakable. She'd been one of the first to speak at the town hall, and she earned every vote she got. Mom planted a small herb garden in the front yard. She said it was time to grow something for herself again. Neighbors stopped by to trade seedlings and recipes. The ramp we built for Gloria now had solar-powered lights along the edges. Kids biked past it every afternoon. One morning, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It read, "You weren't supposed to win."
No signature.
Just that. I handed it to Reyes. He said it matched the handwriting from Janice's journal, which they'd recovered after her conviction. Apparently, she'd kept notes on everyone she thought was a threat. Her attorney's appealing, he said. But with the new charges coming, she's not going anywhere. I tossed the letter into the fire pit that night and watched it curl into ash. Weeks turned into months. The headlines moved on. The task force kept rolling, busting open other HOA scandals across the state. A few even made national news. The Great Suburb Scam, they called it. But here in Oak Ridge, we just lived. No more secret fines. No more trumped-up violations. No more fear. Just neighbors. One Saturday, I found myself at the community garden helping plant a row of tomatoes next to the lavender beds. Rachel walked up with a clipboard, smiling. "You ever think you'd be the guy who brought down the HOA mafia?" "I didn't bring them down," I said, brushing dirt off my hands.
They did that to themselves.
"I just lit the fuse." "Well," she said, "thanks for lighting it." We stood there, watching the sun creep across the sky. Sometimes justice doesn't come in courtrooms or headlines. Sometimes it grows in little rows of green, quietly reclaiming the soil. And sometimes the best revenge is just living free.